When we think of fossils, we typically picture dinosaurs, saber-toothed cats, or maybe some ancient relative of Dumbo. But there's an entire branch of paleontology dedicated to fossils that defy classification. Specimens so weird that scientists can't even agree what the thing was, let alone how it's related to other life forms. And I don't mean because it's new or unknown. I mean just straight up doesn't fit in with anything else known to science. Welcome to Strange Fossils, the craziest critters that have been dug up, shot down or fished out. But before we dive into these prehistoric oddities, I should mention that finding fossils in the first place is pretty unlikely. Fossilization is an incredibly rare event, requiring a unique set of circumstances to take place. The animal must have died in an area with low oxygen and high sediment, usually underwater, where it can be buried and cut off from skin. Over millions of years, layers of rock build up on top and gradually turn to stone. So not only does a creature need to die in the right place, but it also needs to survive the fossilization process relatively intact, which is why we don't see many fossils of squishy things like Earth. Even under these conditions, less than 1 in 10 animals will be fossilized. So while every fossil is special, mysterious fossils are truly one in a fin. The first specimen we have to look at is this goofy-looking monster. It was first discovered in the 1960s in Mazon Creek, Illinois, and named the Tully monster after the nearby Tully Lake. Because its original discovery was so scrappy, scientists had no idea what it was. But thanks to subsequent finds, we now know it was a vertebrate about 2 meters long that swam around in what is now North America during the Pennsylvanian period, between 318 and 299 million years ago. But that's about all we know for sure. Its head looks a bit like a fish's, except instead of gills, it has these leaf-shaped structures that may have functioned as lungs. Some of the individuals found had huge eyes, too, with orbits twice the size of modern goldfish, which makes sense considering they were ambush predators. What's really weird about the Tully monster is its tail. Instead of a typical fish tail, it had something more akin to a frog's. Its skeleton ended abruptly at its midsection, and it had a musky, fleshy appendage, covered in small scales that may have acted like a powerful eel-like appendage used for locomotion. In 2020, scientists tried to get to the bottom of this oddity by looking at the growth rings in the tail to determine if it was made of bone or cartilage, but they found that it was neither. The tissue had mineralized but didn't follow the normal process of skeletal development. So what exactly the Tully monster's rear appendage was, even scientists aren't quite sure. One of the researchers called it a, quote, horrifying mystery. Now let's look at this bizarre fish. Nope, it's not some obscure it's a real animal called a This creature lived around 416 million years ago, when vertebrates were just started to make inroads into the ocean. While we have a lot of fossils of early jawless fish from this time period, very few of them had eyes, making them look like weird alien goldfish, like most blind cave-dwelling animals. Though the Typhlosis probably had excellent hearing and smell, and unlike most fish, it had 2 different types of scales. Small cycloid scales covered its head and large spiny scales covered the rest of its body. The weirdest part of its anatomy was its mouth, though it had 2 separate openings. The front one was lined with sharp teeth and looked much like a modern fish's, but the second mouth, located on the underside, had a fleshy funnel-like structure and was completely toothless. We don't know exactly what it was used for, but because it's located underneath the mouth, it likely played a role in feeding. Perhaps it was used to suck up prey or create suction to hold on to slippery prey. Now let's look at these fossils. At first glance, they look like pieces of charcoal or burnt popcorn, but they're actually a diverse group of extinct creatures from Illinois' Mazon Creek Formation. They're all part of a group of marine animals called Now you might be saying, wait, those are clearly fossils of plants, not animals. And I won't blame you because the difference between plant and animal fossils from this time is often blurry. These fossils are the remains of animals that secreted calcium carbonate, just like clams do today. Scientists have affectionately dubbed them H&Y fossils after the markings they often leave in thin shale. During fossilization, the organism would leave an impression in the mud, which would later harden and preserve as a thin line. As the organism grew, it would leave a new impression behind, forming a second line next to the first. When viewed under a microscope, the impressions resemble a pair of mirror writing, like the letters H and Y at S, a super helpful feature. because it allows scientists to estimate the age of the fossil by measuring how much the lines have worn away. It also gives us clues about the environment in which the animal lived. The width of the lines tells us the size of the organism, while the spacing between them reveals how fast it was growing. Some of these fossils date back as far as 330 million years, which means they could help us track changes in climate and ecosystems over hundreds of millions of years. But as always, not everything fits neatly into our existing frameworks of understanding. Take this fossil, for example. It has a continuous line with no discernible beginning or end. That means it is impossible to tell how big it got or how old it was when it died. Or take this one. It seems to have a kink in the middle of the line. Was it an accident? Or did the organism intentionally coil up? If so, why? So while scientists may not have all the answers, these mysterious fossils continue to reveal secrets about our planet's history. Okay, so I lied when I said those were the weirdest fossils out there. In fact, there are even weirder fossils. You've probably heard of them before because we've featured them before. But they're totally worth talking about again. So far, we've mostly been looking at animals that were somewhat similar to modern life forms, but Ediacara is something else. No known Ediacara species survived past the end of the Cretaceous period 66 million years ago, and none of them seem to have any close relatives among modern organisms. A good example is this fossil called a mammoth. It's basically a tube with a series of vertical plates running down its length. And while it looks kinda simple, it's actually more complex than it appears. Each segment was made of a different material, a soft gelatinous tissue surrounded by a hard calcium carbonate skeleton. And while we don't know exactly how it moved, we do know it wasn't anchored to the seafloor. In fact, it probably floated along with the current, like a feather in the wind. So what exactly a Nemocliphus was, where it fit into the ecosystem, how it ate, how it and whether it was even an animal or all still up in the air. So what do you think? Do you want to find some weird fossils yourself? Then stay tuned. Until next time.